Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Game with Hal. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome a special guest by the name of Robbie Hummel. Robbie is known for his exciting playing career at Purdue and a short stint in professional basketball. Robbie also has won a gold medal playing for Team USA 3-on-3. Robbie most recently is known for his time being color analyst for CBS, Fox, the Big Ten Network, NBC on Peacock, all over the college basketball world. Today's conversation with Robbie Hummel is one you won't want to miss, so stay tuned for this conversation. Welcome in, Robbie, and one of my first questions for you is, what is it like playing basketball at the collegiate level for a storied franchise in the Big Ten at Purdue University?
Yeah, it was something that I really dreamed of as a kid. I had a couple goals when I was like a elementary school kid or a middle school kid, and one of them was to play for the varsity at Valpo High School because I went to all the boys and girls varsity basketball games. It was a big deal in our town, so that was one goal. Another goal I had was to play in the NCAA tournament, and the way you kind of do that is to get to a team that wins and is good, and Purdue has certainly been that since really Coach Painter got there. So he kind of got it back turned around, and to get to play at Purdue and see how far the program has come and just how good of a job Matt Painter has done. And then to kind of get to look back and say, we were some of the building blocks, myself, Etwan Moore, Jawan Johnson, Keaton Grant, Lewis Jackson, Chris Kramer, like those teams were really good early on in his tenure. And, I look at Carl Landry and David Teague as two guys that also helped set the tone, but just a really cool kind of basketball fraternity to be a part of, to get to play in the Big Ten, watching those games as a kid and seeing the great players, whether it was at Indiana or at Purdue or name any Big Ten school, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Michigan, whoever, just to get to be on those floors and experience those atmospheres and to get to kind of live out a dream of playing high-level college basketball. It's what I wanted to do from the time I was a little kid.
Right, and growing up in Indiana and 49 other states, it's just basketball, but then going to college and playing for Purdue, hometown, what is it like to wear that gold and white?
Yeah, well, first of all, getting to play high school basketball in the state of Indiana, it's like high school football in Texas. I think that's a pretty fair comparison. I look at my last high school game. My college roommate, Etwan Moore, eliminated us from the state tournament. But we played it in front of the Michigan City's gym seats 7,500 people. It's sold out. How many high school games do you get to play in that type of atmosphere? And it really does prepare you for what's to come in college, especially if you're going to the Big Ten. But so I look at that as a really special experience for me and getting to play with the guys that I played AU basketball with from the time we were in like fourth grade. That's who I play with at Valpo. So that was a really special thing. And then to get to play at Purdue, West Lafayette's, about an hour and a half drive from Valparaiso. So not far. My parents got to go to almost every game. Just to be close to home, to have a lot of people from my hometown and from Northwest Indiana really be big Purdue fans. It's a pretty special thing. And, you don't take that for granted. Getting to play close to your hometown is a really, really cool thing to have happen to you. And, I was fortunate that for myself and Etwan and Jawan, it all worked out so well for us to pick a school and to go want to play for a coach in Matt Painter that's going to end up being one of the all-time greats in the conference, and then to get to have the success that we did so close to home was a really special 5-year experience for me.
Right, and you mentioned in there that how Matt Painter helped you guys really get to where you wanted to be, and then him building the Purdue program up. What are some lessons that you think you learned under Coach Painter that have helped you excel post-college basketball?
Yeah, accountability, 100%. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we got home from one of those late games that maybe tipped off at 9 Eastern, and you think about if the basketball game's 2 hours, it ends at 11. Now you got to get to the airport, fly home. There was certainly road trips where we got back at 2:30, 3 a.m., where we're rolling into the locker room to turn in our stuff, and I can hear it still to this day. Matt Painter, go to class. And at the time, you're like, I really want to sleep, but I do appreciate the fact that he held us accountable. In the real world, when you have a job, whether it's in TV or whether it's a 9 to 5 or whatever you're doing, just because you had a late night doesn't mean you can just skip out on work. So I just think the accountability aspect, whether that was on the court, off the court, he drove us to be better, but I think the accountability aspect is something that I look back on, and I really appreciate it now, even if then hitting snooze a couple times would have felt pretty good.
Right. And you mentioned a ton of guys who went to go play at Purdue, and you guys being called the baby boilers, playing from a really young age, all freshmen at the same time, getting to play through the junior and senior year till some of you guys played professionally. How do you make sure you build a good community in that locker room and really create chemistry with the players that you're going to be playing with to be able to get to the max that the team can go to?
Well, it was easy because we had a group of good guys. That makes it a lot easier to be able to build that cohesiveness and to build that chemistry and do so in a rather quick way, because we ended up going 15-3 in the Big Ten my freshman year, and we were playing 4 freshmen and 2 sophomores a lot, and I think we were a bit fortunate that the league had just lost Greg Oden and Mike Conley and Alonzo Tucker. So like some really good players had just left the Big Ten. D Brown, there were some studs that were in the league and were no longer in the league. So I think the Big Ten only sent 5 or 6 teams to the NCAA tournament that year. So a bit of a down year, but it just allowed us to build confidence. And we had a good locker room and a lot of confidence in the fact that, our freshman class, you look back and just to look at who we were playing against nationally before we got to college, and you're talking about the top 10 is like, Michael Beasley, Eric Gordon, Derrick Rose, James Harden, Kevin Love, Kyle Singler. Like if you've seen those guys, it's not going to be nearly as intimidating when you get, those guys are some of the best players. Derrick Rose in high school was an animal. Like this dude was just an unbelievable pass first, athletic, explosive point guard. I saw Eric plenty from being in the state of Indiana, playing Indiana All-Stars with him, seeing him on the AAU circuit. There was just so many good players. Like Evan Turner, who's the second pick in the NBA draft, is ranked like 50th coming out of high school. So there's just so many really good players that you saw coming up. And I think we had an advantage, all freshmen in that class, because if you had come through the national AAU circuit, you had seen some guys that were really, really good players in high school. And I think it gave us a leg up.
Right, and after your time at Purdue, you got drafted the second round to the NBA. What do you think one of the biggest transitions was from going to college ball to playing professionally?
I think, for a lot of guys, when you're on your college team, you're probably one of the better players, or you are one of the better players on your team if you're getting drafted by the NBA. So just kind of adapting to a new role, having to be efficient when, all right, my senior year at Purdue, I'm getting 14 shots a game or 16 shots a game to now I get 4. And I think also the fine line, and it's not even just the shots, it's like the touching of the basketball. I ran a lot of motion offense in college and high school, so you're really involved. But as the pro game has gone more into pick and roll, and I wasn't a great pick and roll player by any means, I was going to be stuck in that corner because I was out there to spread the floor as a shooter. And, just not getting to touch it a ton. And when you do touch it, you're probably putting it up. You're probably shooting it. The fine line, though, as a shooter in the NBA, of if you went 2 for 5, you had a great game. If you went 1 for 5, you had a bad game. And that's a tough way to look at it. And you've got to find some other ways to hopefully feel like you contribute, whether it's rebounding, defensively. It's hard to live through your jumper. And, when you're a specialist, it can be really, really challenging, I think, to have the mindset of, man, like that's not a very big difference, 2 for 5, 1 for 5, but from a percentage standpoint, it is a major difference. 20% versus 40%. 40% will get you paid a lot of money. 20% will send you to a different league very quickly. So I think that was probably the biggest adjustment. But then also just dealing with the level of length and athleticism that exists at the pro level. It's the best athletes in the world, and you've got to find a way to kind of find your way quickly.
Right, and you dealt with many types of adversities, getting injured throughout your college career, getting cut, going to play overseas, and then making a return to the NBA. How do you deal with adversity?
You just have to look at it as a temporary setback that can make you stronger and make you better off in the long run. I truly believe that. You look at some of the things that I guess I dealt with the knee injuries and, going to Europe and then coming back and making the NBA and then getting kind of released by the Timberwolves and going back overseas. you have to see the positives in some of those setbacks, and it was certainly hard to do that when you tear your ACL back-to-back seasons, and you're searching for any type of positive. But you also start to appreciate how special it is to play the game. That's one of those things where you can kind of get jaded, or you can kind of lose track of how lucky you are to play, whether it's at the Big Ten level or it's at the NBA level, or if it's even as a pro, if it's overseas or wherever. We're very fortunate to get to play a kid's game, and eventually, well, I guess now in college they get paid for it too. But eventually, hopefully, you make a pro team and can make money doing it, because we didn't have NIL in my day. But I just think in terms of getting back on track and feeling appreciative that you get to do that every day and work on things and enjoy the game of basketball. That was a bit of a silver lining for me, but just understanding too that, I love to play, and I was going to do whatever it took to get back to playing when I kept getting hurt, because growing up in Indiana, what do we have to do? We play basketball. We watch basketball. It's in our DNA. So I was extremely driven and extremely focused to keep my mind on the task, and that was to get back on the floor. And I think also when you've seen the venues and you see the atmospheres in the Big Ten, you want to get back to that. So if you have eligibility and you felt what it feels like to shut up a crowd of 17,000 and get a big road win, you want to get back to that, or to feel what it's like at a Mackey Arena at a home game, to get the crowd going on your side and go on a big run and win a big game. Like those are unbelievable feelings, and like the endorphins and just the feeling you get from having that type of experience. It is a special thing. So I had plenty of motivation, whether that's the love of the game or just to get back to that. And those setbacks do make you stronger, and it's going to help you in the long run, but sometimes it can be hard to see that in the short term.
Right. I mean, you go down with a torn ACL, jammed finger, something like that, that's going to keep you out for a little bit. There seems like there's no light at the tunnel. It's over for you. The season's over. Maybe you don't get to play in some of the big games that year, but there's always a road that leads somewhere to your next opportunity. It just makes you appreciate it the next time you step out on the court. And then retiring for basketball and coming back to play FIBA 3-on-3 for the USA. What is it like to represent the USA?
Well, it's really a special experience, and I thought I was probably done playing for USA basketball after the World University Games. I played on a team coached by Bo Ryan, who was the coach at Wisconsin, and that was like a college Olympics. So I played in that. We got a bronze medal, and I kind of figured, unless I have just some sort of meteoric rise as a player, look at the U.S. national team in 5-on-5. It's going to be all Hall of Famers. So I probably wasn't going to make that team. I was pretty realistic about that. But just to kind of be back into basketball, and my last year of 5-on-5 in Russia, it was really hard for me. I didn't enjoy being over there. It was certainly a tough place to acclimate to. The weather isn't the warmest in Moscow, I can tell you that. And I'm from around Chicago, so it's not like I'm from South Florida or somewhere really warm, but Moscow is a different level of cold. You're actually on the same latitude as Alaska. So you're way up there. I think we sometimes in the United States lose track of how much further north the continent of Europe is compared to us. But like you're way up there. And it didn't end on a good note, even though I played pretty well. My last year in Russia, I averaged 11 points a game and shot it really well from the 3-point line. But I just was burnt out on playing overseas, and I couldn't go back. Being away from my friends and family was too challenging. So to kind of get a second lease on basketball and to be able to enjoy it, I didn't love living overseas, but I like to travel. And 3-on-3 is a great way to see the world in terms of you're going to go, if the tournaments are played on Saturday and Sunday, you're going to probably fly out Wednesday, get there on Thursday, practice when you get there, be there Friday, play Saturday. If you win, if you finish in your top 1 or 2 in your pool, you play Sunday. If not, you played 2 10-minute basketball games and you're going home. But you'd be out of there Monday morning and you'd be home, especially if you're coming from Asia where the time change is so different. So it was a tremendous experience for me, not just the USA stuff, but the pro circuit stuff as well. And I have to thank Craig Moore, who now is actually the GM of Iona men's basketball team. he got me into it. He played at Northwestern when I was at Purdue, and we got to know each other in Chicago in the summers. And he convinced me to play my first tournament in Seoul, South Korea. And I honestly only went because I'd never been to Asia. And I thought, well, if it doesn't go well, I'll just quit, So I think we went to like 25 countries as a team. I played all over the place: Japan, South Korea, China, India, all over Europe, Puerto Rico, Mexico City. We played all over the world. It really was an awesome experience. I didn't ever go to the trips in Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates. I've been to Dubai because of 3-on-3, but like we literally did play all over the world, and that was a really cool experience. Then you throw in the national team stuff and winning a gold medal, and that was special too.
Right, and playing, that's like fast paced, it's not like 5-on-5, it's a completely different game. Half court, take it back. It's almost like backyard ball with the boys.
Yeah.
Getting a little bit more fun out of it. So getting back into it, that's a little bit better way than playing 5-on-5 pro ball. But now you're back with 5-on-5 college basketball, broadcasting that. What was it like for you getting into the broadcasting world?
It was a very interesting kind of journey because it didn't happen overnight by any means. When I was in the NBA, I did the NBA's version of Sportscaster U, which was the first iteration was at Syracuse. And it was like a crash course in all things broadcasting. So we called a game for TV. We called a game for radio. We did studio shows. And this was all during the NBA Finals. So I want to say our class was Danny Granger, Kalena Azubuike, Randy Foy, Matt Bonner, Amari Stoudemire, Nazi Muhammad, myself. Did I say Danny Granger? Yeah, I did. Yeah. Danny was, yeah. So that was who was there. And we just kind of like, you'd alternate. You'd change positions on the desk. You'd act as like a sideline or a reporter on site. We did a demonstration on the court, but it was all things that were taken from the NBA Finals. So that was a really cool experience to kind of get to see what TV is about. And I don't think that I was necessarily good at it, but I enjoyed it. I also did the NBA's second version the next summer, which was at the University of Virginia. We called games at the NBPA Top 100 camp, which is the top 100 high school players in the country go to Virginia and play. And all the coaching is done by NBA guys. There's a GM kind of symposium, and then the games are called by guys that maybe want to get into calling games. So I did that. And then I was playing in Milan for Giorgio Armani's team after I was out of the NBA. And I dislocated my shoulder and had to have surgery, tore my labrum in my left shoulder. And when I came home, Big Ten Network reached out and asked if I'd want to do some studio. So I was like, I'm helping out at Purdue. I'm rehabbing down there. But yeah, that'd be awesome to get to try to see what it's like. And it's funny how this works. I'd only been on 2 or 3 times, and somebody approached me at BTN, and they said their friend was an agent, a broadcasting agent, and wondered if I'd want to talk to him. And in my mind, I was like, this guy has to suck because if he wants to talk to me, I haven't been doing this hardly at all. And I'm sure, I maybe had some decent things to say, but I couldn't have been polished at that point in time. I'd really not done much. But I'd followed the Big Ten pretty closely still. So, but I was like, you know what? I'll talk to him. It can't hurt. I was like, I'll Google this guy. He probably reps like nobody. And it turns out that's my agent still to this day. And he did have some really, really good clients at that time. And it was like, wow, well, maybe there is something to be said about this. But I still wanted to play, rehab my shoulder. Ended up signing a deal with the Nuggets. I was the last cut in training camp and took a deal over in Moscow. And about halfway through the season, I told my basketball agent, who was Mark Bartelstein, and my broadcasting agent, who's Maury Gosfriend, look at what you can get, and I'll make a decision, and we'll just see where things go. But I'm going to take the best opportunity and go from there. I didn't necessarily like my basketball options. I got hurt a little bit in the summer again, and had offers to go back overseas, an offer in Spain, an offer in Turkey, but just it wasn't something that really appealed to me. So I ended up saying no to all that stuff. Had an offer in Israel. Actually, it was a 2-year deal, but it just didn't seem to make it make sense. And I took the broadcasting route and was lucky to be on ESPN and Big Ten Network my first year. And it's just kind of taken off from there. But it was over the course of like 2 or 3 years that all kind of fell into place.
Right. And being a broadcaster for these big networks, you're calling different games on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 6 different teams potentially. What is it like to prep for all different teams, and how do you use that prep to produce the best broadcast?
I do end up getting a good amount of games where it's the same teams back to back, especially in conference play. You think about some of the games, if you're doing a Tuesday game on Peacock and you're doing the Saturday game on Fox, there's a decent chance that because, the way that the broadcast rights work out, if you've got Michigan State on a Tuesday, you very well could have them on a Saturday as well. So that definitely helps when you've watched their last game in person. But I do predominantly Big Ten and Big East for Fox and BTN and Peacock, and then of course the tournament with CBS and Turner. But that's not until March. So you do see a lot of the same teams over and over again. And, I have my routine like every broadcaster does, and it's about kind of sticking to that. And the process of that, I keep a notebook of personnel where I'll watch, 40, 50, 60 clips on a guy, and you can get a pretty good idea for what every player really likes to do, whether that's to drive, straight line drive with their left hand, or if they go right, they like to spin back to their left. You can see those tendencies that I think really, make you not just sound like you know what you're talking about, but you have a great idea for what these guys want to do. And I think that's a really valuable thing. I make my game boards that I do for every game, and that probably takes me about, I would say, an hour per team. And then I'll watch their last game, and I'll watch if the teams have played already in the year, which you don't usually get until February. So, I'm pretty meticulous about the way that I prep for games and the way that I do. And I've just found that if I write stuff down, I remember it. So I have terrible handwriting, which doesn't make for great boards. It's good for me, I guess. But when I show people them, they're like, good God, what does this say? But I just think sticking to your process, and you do see a lot of the same teams over the course of the season. So that definitely helps. But you've got to be on it. You've got to manage your time wisely. And that's another thing that, going back to college, that was something that Coach Painter and our academic people were always on us about.
Right. And being an analyst, it's not easy to reach out to every single audience member. Some might be watching their first college basketball game because they're going to the college next year and they want to get a sense of what the team is like, or they've been a diehard fan for 20 plus years. How do you make sure you're given correct information and valuable information, but making sure that all levels of audience will be able to comprehend it?
Yeah, I think really good analysts can talk about complex basketball ideas or football ideas or whatever sport you have, and put them into terms where even a beginner or a novice basketball fan can understand. And I think certainly using replay, and if you have a telestrator, that's a great way to show it as well. But I think that's what the really good analysts do. But I think also mixing in interesting stories about players, and whether that's a guy that played for his national team in the summer or had a great experience with USA basketball, or grew up and his dad coached him and his dad's a former player. There's any number of stories and personal, I guess, human interest stories that these games provide. And I think having a good mixture of stories with the game, with stats, there's a mixture of all of those things thrown into one that makes for a good broadcast. And on top of that, having good chemistry with your partner. But I just think that in terms of speaking to all fans, it's really about trying to simplify some of the complex things that are going on. And that's easier said than done. I think the really good analysts figure out how to do that, and they speak to all people that are watching those games. And that's something that we're all striving to do. I think every one of us that's doing TV is hoping that they can do those things effectively every time out.
Right. And you don't just stick on the air and call it done from there. You talk college basketball 24/7, doing pregame shows with the Big Ten, or hopping on a podcast with one of your good friends, Jeff Goodman, or anybody else.
Good friend is a loose term there. Loose term, good friend.
That you would want to do a podcast with. How do you make sure you're getting accurate information and getting takes or facts that maybe someone else wouldn't know?
Well, I think in terms of getting accurate information, it's important for you to watch the games that you're talking about. And that's hard. I look at some of those guys in the field of 68, and Rob Doster is a good example. He watches a ton of games because he wants to be able to speak what he sees. I think where you get yourself in trouble is where maybe you don't watch and you read or you listen up on somebody's podcast, and I think that's where it's hard. It's hard for those guys that are doing those shows every night. But Rob is a great example of somebody who watches a ton of basketball games. Podcast wise, ours is pretty much, even though I think we've tried to be more national with my schedule, it's been hard for me to do the podcast from a national perspective. I mostly talk about Big Ten and Big East, and Jeff kind of has taken some of the SEC, ACC, to the point where we've even talked about maybe we need to add a third person because I don't have the time to watch, and I don't feel comfortable talking about the games that I'm not watching night in and night out. And it's not because I don't want to, it's because I'm normally doing a game or a studio show or something in the winter. So it is a challenge, and I just think that it's important, though. You owe it to your fans, you owe it to everybody that's listening to those podcasts to give accurate information. And fortunately there's not too much like deep fake info about college basketball, so it's different than if you're doing like the news or something like that. But I do think you've got to talk about what your eyes see. I think that's the most important thing.
Right. I mean, you don't want to give someone, if they're tuning into your show for college basketball information, you don't want to say something that might not be true or be the wrong information because you read an article that you perceive something different from. And then another thing for you is being in basketball your whole life. What was a career highlight for you?
Being drafted, getting drafted in the NBA, it's something I'd wanted to have happen since I was a little kid. I grew up in Valparaiso, like we talked about, but the Bulls were huge, right? So like the 90s Bulls were at the height. I was, 9 years old when Jordan won the last title in 98. So those years really shaped, I think, a lot of my love for basketball as well. And just to get to hear your name called, and especially after the knee injuries and some of the setbacks that I'd had, I had the back injury my sophomore year as well, to still find a way to get picked and make the NBA and play for 2 years, like that's probably my, I guess, favorite moment of my career. But there was a lot of really good ones. There was certainly some lows, but there was some really high highs as well. But to hear Adam Silver, who at the time was the deputy commissioner, because it was the second round, call my name, even if it was the second to last pick in the draft, 58, or I guess third to last pick in the draft. That there's just not many guys that get to have that feeling, to hear their name. And it's a good thing too, because I had a party that night with all my friends and family. So 3 more picks, it would have been a very awkward night.
Right. I mean, only 60 people a year get that chance to hear their name called, which is pretty special. And then last question for you is, what is some of your advice that you would give to maybe a high school version of you?
Be able to find joy even in the times where there are setbacks. And, I just feel like it was so hard because there was so much stress. My career is very interesting in the sense of, if you had told high school me, you'll get drafted, you'll play in the NBA for 2 years, you'll play professional basketball for 5, you'll then play 3-on-3 for 3 or 4 more years, you'll win a gold medal in the world championships of 3-on-3, I'd be like, sign me up. But once I got to college and started really playing well at Purdue, you're thinking, well, I'll play in the NBA for 10 years. So it's kind of like a conflicted feeling, I guess. But just to tell myself, enjoy some of the processes you're going to go through. There's going to be some setbacks. Don't let it get you down. Keep fighting, because it will pay off. And I think I did a pretty good job of doing that. But there were certainly times where I'm like, man, what am I doing? And even like, if I blow my knee out one more time, I'm done. I can't keep putting everything I have into this rehab and not playing to then just come back and have this happen again. So, certainly find the joy in some of those moments that weren't the happiest, and just push right through them would have been my advice. But that was going to be easier said than done too, because it was hard. It was definitely hard.
All right. To conclude here, we have the final 14 questions, rapid fire pace, very quick.
Okay.
doing with everybody. So
Cool.
let's get right into it. Who's your idol?
My dad.
Favorite fast food?
Boy, McDonald's.
Biggest fear?
Tornadoes. I do not like bad storms.
Favorite school subject?
Social studies.
Favorite hobby?
Play golf.
Favorite gym workout?
I like to lift weights.
Favorite influencer?
Oh, the Australian guys that mimic the broadcast. So I like those guys.
Favorite artist?
Ooh, that's hard. This is gonna date me here a little bit, but Wiz Khalifa.
Favorite animal?
Favorite animal. I had a stuffed animal growing up that was a polar bear, and I really like that, so I'll go with polar bear.
Favorite TV show?
Entourage.
Biggest pet peeve?
When people drink out of like the milk carton or the orange juice carton, I don't like that.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No, definitely not.
Favorite emoji?
Probably the 101. When somebody says something, you put 100.
And then last but not least, are you a shower singer?
I think I'm a shower like hummer. I don't think I necessarily sing, but I definitely, will have tunes that I'm humming.
Always needed, like a drum, baby, don't stop beating.